What am I doing here? I said, what am I doing here?
I am in Manchester, England. It's a chilly night, and I am standing outside the Lesser Free Trade Hall, which now is actually a Radisson hotel, it looks like. But it used to be a concert venue. And on June 4th, 1976, the Sex Pistols played one of the most legendary concerts of all time. Not because there were a million people there. There were only like 35 or 40, which is not a lot. That's a hard show to play. I can speak from personal experience. But some of the most important and influential musicians before they became those people attended that concert. So Morrissey of the Smiths, 2 members of Buzzcocks, 2 members of Joy Division, member of The Fall. You know, we're talking like iconic and insane groups of the 70s and 80s were all here in this room together before they became the people that we know them as. So when you actually kind of like statistically parse that out, like 10% of the crowd ended up becoming some of the most important and influential musicians of their generation. And I think that fact speaks to something bigger about Manchester and its role in music history. So today I'm going to be talking to my friend and music journalist Eve Barlow about Manchester, its role in the history of rock and roll, because it's been the birthplace of bands not only in the 70s in this kind of punk era, but in every era since, in these really important and foundational ways. And I'd like to understand how that happens and what it means. And before I talk to Eve, here's a rapid-fire list of bands from Manchester. Oasis, The Smiths, Joy Division, Buzzcocks, The 1975, New Order, The Stone Roses, 808 State, Elbow, The Verb, Autechre, The Fall, Happy Mondays, and even Herman's Hermits. I'm Henry VIII, I am Henry VIII, I am.
I really just wanted to kind of go through Manchester music throughout the decades. And, you know, as, of course, you are well aware, the city's been the birthplace of so many of these iconic British bands. And I was just curious to get your take on why that is the case.
For sure. It's interesting that you're asking me this now, because last week I did a new interview with Liam Gallagher. We sat down at the Sunset Marquee last week, and I asked him what it is about the legacy of Manchester, because I reminded him that the 1975 are from Manchester and arguably one of the biggest bands in the world right now. And
Totally.
He didn't realize they were from Manchester and did his typical Liam Gallagher thing of like just totally ripping them a new one and being like, oh, well, I don't know what the fuck's going on in Manchester now if they're from there. Fuck knows. But he also, his response was that he finds it really hard to put his finger on what it is about the city, but there must be something in the water. And I think with Manchester specifically, so much of the identity of the city is kind of going out and having a good time and, yeah, working really hard in the day, but also having a balance. And people gravitate towards bands as their identity because they go out and watch those bands and they enjoy them together and they know how to have a drink. And, you know, it's like people either want to be in a band or they want to follow a band.
It strikes me, having, you know, played there, I don't know how many times I've been to Manchester now, maybe like 5 times, that there's a scrappiness to the city. I even look back on my own career, which sort of makes no sense on some level, and it's basically guided by those words and then just scrappiness.
I think with Manchester too, Manchester's like a funny city. It's really friendly. People there are really interested in other people, but they've got this like funny, defiant kind of cheeky sense of humor where there's a lot of swagger to people in Manchester, you know. It's funny that Liam's new record is called Why Me, Why Not? Because it kind of like sums up how I feel people are in Manchester. They're just kind of like, why the fuck not? Can I be like an absolute rock star?
You know,
right.
And sort of this preternatural belief that you will be able to do it and it will be good.
Yes. And also the interesting parallel with your career is also just how you've kind of like thrown yourself into everything. Like you haven't been tied to one idea of something. And Manchester is very similar in that sense that, you know, like one of its great legacies is the Hacienda's nightclub that started in the late, I don't know if it started in the very late 80s or the absolute cusp of like going into the early 90s. But it was started by, you know, this man, Tony Wilson, who was associated with Joy Division, and then Ian Curtis, you know, committed suicide, and New Order was spawned out of that. But he was tied to them and managing them and running the label. And then this nightclub that would then house these insane raves of like house music but also rock bands. It really gave Manchester inspiration to colour completely outside of the lines when it came to genre. And that's how you had a band like Happy Mondays come up through that scene, and even to an extent Stone Roses, because if you listen to the first Stone Roses record, it's not like, I mean, obviously like John Squire's guitar playing is, you know, incredible alternative indie guitar licks, but the sound of it, they were a jam band, but they're also influenced by the rhythm of electronic music. And it's a hybrid of dance music and rock music. And I'm not sure that would ever have spawned were it not for Manchester. I mean, I'm sure where their heads were at was also like inebriated by the birth of ecstasy and all the rest of it. But like that shit all happened in Manchester. So I think sometimes people talk about the years around 1989 and 1990 in Manchester as kind of like the second summer of love. I'm pretty sure that that's something that people have kind of likened it to in the past, in the sense of it being this like second renaissance and like a new wave of ideology around live performance and community of audience, you know. It's interesting to me because I grew up in Glasgow and then migrated down to Manchester to go to school. And both cities actually, Glasgow too has an enormous history for important British bands. And the thing that both cities share in common is how rainy they both are, which might sound like the most basic thing to say. But I think there's something in how shit the weather is in both cities and how unifying it is for people. And there's something about British creativity in the sense that it's so gloomy a lot of the time, and you can never rely on having a good spate of weather that really drives people to create.
I loved talking to Eve about Manchester. I think there are so many things about the city that make it this breeding ground for creativity. The gloomy weather, the people, the nightlife, the mixing of electronic and rock music. But more than anything, I think it's this attitude summarized in the title of Liam Gallagher's new solo record, which is Why Me, Why Not? And when you follow any dream, you sort of have to have a bizarre belief that you, the weird kid from the scrappy city with a strange haircut and a guitar or a computer or a notebook, you can be the biggest rock star in the world. If you want to talk to me about stuff on the internet, you can use the hashtag K.Flay Show, or you can email me at thekflayshow@gmail.com. And of course, you can listen to my new album, Solutions, everywhere that you like to listen to music. So there's a new episode of What Am I Doing Here every week. Be sure to set a reminder for the K.Flay Show after 9 a.m. on Wednesday. I'm currently on tour in the UK and Europe, and I would love to see you. You can grab tickets at kflay.com/tour.